morning. Sorry about the technical issues. I hate Facebook. Hopefully you can hear me. Sorry about that. Facebook decided to not publish my live scheduled Q&A, which was great fun. So hopefully people will be able to catch up with this one. I've just reshared it to all the groups, I believe. So hopefully you should be able to see it. It's public on my timeline, so if you are friends with me, then it's on my timeline currently. If you're within one of the groups, I've just shared it, so hopefully you should be able to see me and hear me. Why do I do these stressful things? Okay, so welcome everybody. Again, apologies for that, but we'll get up and running, and we've got quite a bit to cover this morning. I feel like Desert Island Discs, I've got so many requests, so hopefully this morning we can cover some of the questions that were posted during the last 2 weeks. So thank you for those, and again, if you've got any questions for the that you want to pose now, then add them to the the comments underneath this video, and we'll crack on with those as well. So welcome. Again, we're still kind of in lockdown if you're in the UK. I know everybody's frustrated to get back out on the bowling greens, and you know there are moves afoot to get some clarity on how we can do that, and I also know that some clubs have actually managed to get some people out on the rink, so well done to you for doing that. But of course, the ultimate message for all of that is keep safe and keep well. We're still in a bit of a crisis situation across the world. If you're joining from down under, good evening. I know there's some people that wanted to join from Australia, New Zealand, so that's why we set it for 11 o'clock this morning. So welcome to you all if you're joining us from down under. Okay, so let's crack on with some of the things that we wanted to cover from 2 weeks ago and subsequently. And forgive me if some of the graphics don't work, but I've got a newfangled piece of kit. Hopefully it will work, so it should improve the stream, hopefully. So some of the things that were really raised, certainly in the last Q&A, but also during the last 2 weeks, have been mainly around rink possession. There's been a lot of questions about rink possession and how we deal with it. There was quite a few questions about marking, so we'll try and cover some of those. Laser measures, interesting one. Yeah, there's been some publicity about laser measures recently from Australia, and you know, inevitably the comments from that have come through. So we'll try and talk a little bit about laser measures. I'll give you my personal views on that, and also I want to talk a little bit about proactive umpiring, what umpires can do to reduce the risk of breaches of the laws, and how to deal with some of those little quirky things that pop up. And there's been quite a debate on one particular scenario which we'll try and cover off. And I know there's people that will be watching that won't probably agree with some of the things I say, and some of the ways I do things. But that's perfectly acceptable. We're all different, and we all have our different views and all different ways of working. What I will say, of course, first of all, is I'm not here representing any official body. I'm not here representing the English Bowls Umpires Association or World Bowls as a member of the Laws Committee. So these are purely my own views and purely my own discussion. Okay, so I think the first one, really, let's get ploughed into rink possession. There's been a number of questions. Shirley Upton, Sue Mates, many others. And just recently John Mackenzie popped in and asked a question about rink possession and how we deal with it. And I think we can pretty much go through a couple of scenarios I think will be quite appropriate. But firstly, I want to just show you this graphic. This graphic is really just an image of positions of players and where they should or shouldn't be. And if you notice that there's a blue player on the mat ready to bowl, and you've got various other people standing around. You've got two people at the bottom of the screen, the bottom of the image there, quite happily standing there talking to each other from opposing team. They're in the absolute correct position. They're absolutely fine on the rink. You'll see a member of the blue team standing with the arrow above his head, standing just short of the jack. He's got a tick as well. He's standing in a good position. So that's absolutely fine as well. You'll also see just at the back of the rink there is a guy looking quite relaxed in blue. He has a tick as well. So he's absolutely fine. Just bear with me one moment. Let me just check the stream is working fine. We might have some intermittent issues there with the streaming, so I'll keep going, and apologies for that. So all of the blue people you can see are standing in the correct position. So then we move on to the people that are opposing blue, the red players, and you can see there's one person at the back of the head in red. He's absolutely fine. But you've also got one person in red standing halfway up the rink. He's not in a good position, and one standing to the right hand side. He's also not in a good position. He's on the neighbouring rink. So the law states that those players should not be standing in those positions. Those two red players with the crosses above their heads, they shouldn't be standing in those positions. So the key thing about this is, what do we do about it? And there's a number of ways that we can deal with people standing in the wrong place, but there's actually no penalty in that particular law about where they're standing that we can deal with, but it does refer to another law which does deal with the penalty. So what do we do about it? Let me just come back and give you a couple of scenarios. Let's imagine we're playing a game, and I'm playing against an opponent. I'm on the mat ready to bowl. It's a nice afternoon, we're having a good game, everything's friendly. My opponent delivers his bowl, he wanders up the rink, stops about halfway, turns around, comes back. His bowl has come to rest and he's ambling back to the mat, and I'm standing there waiting to bowl. He delivers a good one, I'm happy with that. I say congratulations to him, high fives, everything's happy and hunky-dory. Now, he may not have been in the right position by the time his bowl comes to rest, but I'm not bothered. I'm just ready to bowl, and I do exactly the same. I wander up to the head, I stop halfway, watch my bowl come to rest, and then wander back to the mat. As an umpire, generally, we wouldn't intervene in those situations. Okay, we're both doing it, we're both in the wrong positions, so we shouldn't really be dealing with those situations as an umpire. However, what does change is when those players then start getting a bit niggly with each other. So if we have the same scenario, player walks up the green, stands halfway up the rink, and he doesn't move, and I get really uppity, I start getting upset with it all, and it was affecting me. So that was clearly disturbing me. It was something I wasn't happy with him doing, and therefore as an umpire we probably need to move in and start dealing with something along those lines. And the key part to this is those three words: annoy, interfere and distract. So if any of those things occur, if you notice those things occurring with a player, annoying, interfering or distracting behaviour, people in the wrong position, then you can start dealing with it, and there is a penalty associated with rink possession. You give a warning, and then if it persists, then you have the right to remove the bowls. Okay. Apologies if some of you are struggling with the the video stream. It seems to be a bit jumpy. I'm sitting right next to the router, so apologies if something is amiss there. I'm happy to carry on if it's watchable. If not, we may have to rethink. Yeah, I'm sorry if some of you are struggling with the video feed on this. I'm more than happy to restart if you feel that's appropriate. I can come away from the streaming software I'm using. Just drop me a line. Okay, so I hope that deals with ring possession in terms of positions and position of players, and thank you for those questions that you asked about the ring possession. There's one from John McKenzie that talked a little bit about also players that cross over. So when you're crossing over in a team and they have a discussion mid-ring, if they're not in possession of the ring, i.e. they're not, it's not their turn to bowl, then they shouldn't be in that position, and it can annoy the opponents, and therefore we need to be dealing with those scenarios. And it's often these things are dealt with by just a quiet word, and they're resolved quite easily. But if it does start annoying, interfering or distracting the opponent, then that's when we need to deal with it. Okay, so I hope that helps. Again, yeah, apologies for the jumpy video. Home Wi-Fi is obviously not working particularly well this morning, so apologies for that. Okay, and I think with the video I'm just hoping that you'll see some of the graphics, because they do help explain some of the things. So I hope that's answered the ring possession side of things. I want to move on to something that was covered in the last Q&A a couple of weeks ago, which I didn't explain particularly clearly, but it also I didn't have the diagram up the right way apparently, and I did look back and I did it upside down. But I think I just want to clarify the situation with bowls that come to rest on top of touchers or the jack in the ditch and remain live. So I just want to show you a couple of images, and again I hope you can see these. The first one is a bowl that's come to rest on top of a jack, and if you saw the last stream, I explained that a ditch can be a minimum of 50 millimeters, just about 2 inches. A jack is around about 2.5 inches, 60, 65, 67 mil. So it's entirely possible for the jack to be visible above the surface of the rink. And it's quite possible for what you can see here, the red bowl coming to rest on top of that jack. Similarly, it's also worth saying that bowl is not a toucher, even though it's come to rest on top of the jack. Similarly, if you've got a live bowl in the ditch, as you can see here, there's a bowl, the red bowl's come to rest on top of it. It's not a toucher. It's if it falls in the ditch, it's a dead bowl, but it's come to rest, and that's a perfectly legal position for that bowl to be in. And that was kind of the diagram that was, or the photograph that was showed last time, but this is, I hope, a little bit clearer in terms of that's the toucher, the blue bowl, and the red bowl is has come to rest on top of it. Okay, so I hope that's clarified that one. Okay, a couple of questions coming in before we carry on. And again, yes, so I'm sorry about the video. I've actually tried, I've got a piece of streaming software which I'm trying to use, which gets all these funky graphics on the screen for me, and I think there's a little bit of a connection issue between that and Facebook. But Facebook's been a nightmare this morning anyway, so Apologies for all of that. Okay, so a couple of questions coming in. Ron Thornhill, that'll be father then. Thank you for joining. And he's asked I knew he'd asked a tricky question because he loves these ones. Just tell me again why bowls can't be an Olympic sport, and that is a complicated question because there is a lot involved in the whole scenario. I'm not privy to all the discussions that go on at world level, but I do understand that there is a lot of work going on, and there has been over a number of years with World Bowls, the governing body, and the Commonwealth Games Federation to try and get bowls within the Olympics. And I think if you play bowls, there is a general frustration that you see things like other sports, beach volleyball, although it's good to watch sometimes, but there's other sports that are coming in, skateboarding, I think break dancing was one of them as well, and it's frustrating because bowls is a good sport. It's in the right format, it's a good sport to watch, but unfortunately there are, as I understand it, simply not enough countries participating in it to allow it to become an Olympic sport. It's more complicated than that, but that is, I think, the crux of the situation. But there has been lots of discussions. There has been discussions with similar sports such as Petanque and Boule federations to try and amalgamate with those so that we can get this into the Olympics. If you think about the Olympics in terms of a sporting organisation and all the countries that take part in it, certainly within our home countries it would be under a GB banner, whereas in the Commonwealth, which bowls has been a core sport of, we're all individual nations. So immediately you're sort of losing 4 or 5 nations just because of the structure of the Olympic Games, and that's what makes it a little bit frustrating in terms of the number of countries. So a bit of a long-winded answer to the question, but that's my understanding as it is at the moment. Okay, I'll just pop on to a few questions that came in about marking. Marking is a skill. I mean, it's having a good marker at the end of the rink is a must for players, and all too often you will see club markers standing at the back of the rink, not really doing a whole lot. They'll mark the scorecard every end, and they'll wander up and down the rink, but there won't be much interaction. There won't be much going on. Training as a marker is actually probably more important than training as an umpire in terms of the skills that you need to mark a good game of singles. And there's a couple of things that I just want to cover in the short period we've got. In terms of positioning, but also in terms of answering questions. I think answering questions as a marker is always the one that catches people out and always causes debate. There's this perception that we're not answering questions in line with the laws of the sport, for example, or why have we changed? Why have we changed the way we answer questions of players? So let me just show you a couple of graphics to start with. The first one is a scenario related to answering questions. And if you see these two images here, you've got 2 purple bowls and 1 red bowl. The red bowl is short. On the left hand side you've got the overhead view, on the right hand side you've got the view as the player would see it from the mat. And it's quite a deceiving image when you're on the mat looking at it. So the key to this is how you answer the questions that come from the player. And I just want to run you through a couple of scenarios and see if you agree with the way this works. If I'm the red player, for example, and I want to ask the marker a question, I might turn around to him and say, am I holding 1? Now, looking at the overhead shot that the marker has, he might turn around and say, well, no, you're not. So then the next question from me as a red player is, okay, so am I one down? Marker says, no, you're not. So then I get a little bit frustrated and I'm thinking, well, hang on a minute, if I'm not one up and I'm not one down, who holds shot then? And the marker turns around and says blue. Now, the next question is going to be, that's a bit weird, so I've just asked if I was holding one, I've just asked if I was one down, and now you've turned around and said I'm one down. So the next question might be, so how many does the blue player hold? And the marker turns around and says 2. Now that's a long conversation for a marker and a player to be having on the rink. You know, there's 3 or 4 interactions there which you may not needed. So perhaps a more appropriate answer from the marker would have been, if I asked the same question, am I holding 1? The marker turn around and say, no, you're 2 down. There we are, happy, question answered, all I need to know, very quick, all sorted. So that may not be what the laws say. That may, if the law says that a marker shall answer a specific question, that doesn't. What defines a specific question? I'm sure you've been on the rink and heard many times, what's the position? How does the marker answer that? Do we just ignore it? Because it's not a specific question. So it's important to think about what the player's looking for in terms of an answer, but also looking for in terms of the way he's going to be playing the next shot. We're not talking about giving that much information that you're affecting the shot they play, and that's the clear distinction. You need to understand that you cannot give away too much more information to allow them to make a decision on the shot, but it is important to give them the information they're looking for. So I hope that helps a little bit in terms of answering questions as an example. The other thing the number of people have asked is about the use of shot indicators, or lollipops as we generally call them. And again, their correct use is quite important. They are really used to indicate the state of play to the spectators, and to some extent to the players, but you should always fall back on answering questions verbally. If a player asks a question, don't give an answer using a lollipop. Now they're not commonly seen, certainly at club level. They are becoming more and more common, certainly at county championships or regional championships, and certainly international events as well. So I just want to show you a couple of images in terms of positioning, and we talked a bit about positioning in the last stream a couple of weeks ago, but this image kind of indicates where a marker ideally should be standing during play, when everything's happening and there's not too much going on in terms of driving shots and marking touches and everything else. So this is a comfortable position to be standing, and you can see there an indication of 2 shots to blue, nice and relaxed, head height, lollipops nice and clear, and the spectators can see it. And it's worth just giving them a little turn 90 degrees either way, so that people down the side of the rink can see as well. And of course this is assuming that you've got plenty of spectators sitting around. Some no-nos, some do's and don'ts with lollipops. I'm just going to scroll through some of these. There's an indication of 3, how to correctly hold the lollipops when you're indicating 3. And similarly with 4. Again, nice and relaxed, fingers between each one, spread out nice and evenly. Some no-nos, don't wave the lollipops up in the air too high. They're not flags. So keep them nice and relaxed at head height. And similarly, don't use a spare lollipop as a handle, if you like. Don't have them dangling down. That can either be 2 or 3, depending which way you want to look at it. So always keep spare lollipops that you're not using tucked behind the others. so that it's nice and clear. Okay, so I hope that helps in terms of the lollipop position. There was a comment. Yep, there's a comment there from David White. Thank you. Anticipate the questions as if you are a player, and absolutely spot on. And I think what makes a great marker is somebody that understands the game and understands what the players are really looking for in terms of answers and anticipation. A really good marker will answer a question quite fast, and if you do watch marking at any level, try and catch some of the higher level games where we've got some really good markers working out there that are answering questions straight off. Which is shot, this bowl, how far short, 5 inches. It's really quick. Because that's the anticipation. As soon as that bowl has come to rest, the marker's looking to see its position in relation to jack high. It's looking to see the position in terms of shot, second bowl, whichever, and able to answer the questions there and then. Clearly, if it's a measure or it's very close, you don't want to be guessing at it. So at the next available opportunity, you might want to then step in and have a look. At the end of the day, the player may well ask you which is shot, and you can take your time and have a look. In terms of judgment calls when you're marking, again, your eyes, yeah, we all have good days and we all have bad days, and sometimes our eyes fail us. But try and be as accurate as you can. Practice looking at bowls in different setups to see which is shot, and then get your measuring practice in as well, and practice deciding which is shot and then going down and measuring to make sure you're right. It's a really good technique for sort of getting used to positioning a bowl and how they look on the rink, and it should make you more accurate as you try and determine shots. And the other thing, not only just determining which is shot and giving a call, try not to sit on the fence too much with the players. You want to gain the players' confidence, and in order to do that, if you make a call, okay, it might be wrong at the end of the day when you come to do a measure, but at least you've made a call and you've made a judgment call. It's far better to do that than have somebody sit on the fence, getting splinters where they don't want them, and the player loses confidence. They want to know. They're at the far end of the ring. They want to know what's going on. The other thing is distances. Try and be as accurate as possible with distances. If a bowl is 5 inches in diameter, so if a bowl is short of a jack by 5 inches, you should be able to fit another bowl in that gap. So use the objects on the green to judge your distances. A jack is 2.5 inches, so if you've got a gap that's 2.5 inches, the jack should fit in it. So use the objects and try and be as accurate as you possibly can. If it's 18 inches, then don't say 2 foot, because that's a little bit too far. Okay, so try and be as accurate as you can. Darren, can I show position of lollipops if it's a tied end? Yeah, funnily enough, I did take that graphic out, which was a bit weird. I should have left it in, but luckily I do have some props. So a tied end situation for lollipops is usually something like that. It might vary. Some countries do it slightly differently, but it's usually showing both paddles at that sort of angle, sort of in that position as a tied end as you walk down the rink. You might be a little bit more delicate with your fists and hold them like that, but that's the sort of thing for a tied end. Okay. If it's a measure during the end and you're calling the shots, if it's a measure, you might want to just use the 2 lollipops, or no lollipops at all, and just indicate above your head it's a measure like that. That works, or use the 2 lollipops and just indicate like that, but it's a measure. Okay. Thank you, Darren, for that question. John Roberts, welcome. John from Australia, great to see you on here. What, no trousers? My God, what's happening in the UK? Yes, thank you. It's always it's cold up here, John. Yeah, it's always a little bit of banter between us about wearing shorts and wearing long trousers. And actually, John, as I look out the window now, it's just started raining. So it's not shorts weather just yet. Okay. John, let me just catch up with a few questions. Yeah, okay. So, the other thing that cropped up a couple of times during the week were questions about wedging jacks. It's an interesting question. Apologies if that bang, that was the door slamming because the wind's got up and the rain. The wedging jacks is an interesting question, and I would, in my opinion, never ever wedge a jack. You should never be in a situation where you need to wedge a jack to carry out a basic measure. However, I have seen scenarios where it perhaps would be appropriate to wedge a jack, and those would be, for example, if the jack is right on the edge of the rink and you're measuring to it, and maybe it's windy or like it is out there now, there may be a chance that jack could rock on its own accord and fall into the ditch. So there may be the opportunity there to do that. I've also seen jacks roll on the seams on indoor carpets, and that, if it's been propped up by a bowl, resting against a bowl and it's on the seam, then it may move when you come to take that shot away or something like that. So there are the odd occasion where you need to wedge a jack. But I would say, let me just show you another graphic, not that one, that one. I would say that generally when you're carrying out a measure such as this one, which is probably a caliper measure, there shouldn't really be a need to wedge a jack as shown here. My view with that is that you're more likely to move the jack by wedging it than you are by measuring it, measuring the bowl and the jack. So it's probably safer not to use those little jack wedges. I know they come in the kit, but they're good gum shields for when the going gets tough. So try and avoid wedging the jack, and really it's all about practice. Certainly with things like calipers or feeder gauges where you're really in tight to the bowl and the jack, it's all about practice. And one of the things I like to tell new umpires is to practice at home and practice on smooth surfaces. An indoor carpet is probably as slick as you're going to measure on, but if you've got a lino tile floor, something like that, try practicing measuring a jack and a bowl on those surfaces, smooth surfaces, and try and get as accurate as you can without touching the jack, because if you touch the jack on those surfaces, it's going to move. So the more accurate you are and the more careful you are doing that, then the less reason you have to wedge a jack. And I thank you for thank you to Dave Byatt. I'm not sure, Dave, if you're online, but thank you to Dave Byatt for the question. The jack is relatively light. Why is it not wedged? That's. I hope that's explained that in a little bit more detail for you. Sorry about that menu keep popping up. Okay. John, yes, I know in some countries you do certainly wedge jacks, and we see it. It happens. And it's all about having the confidence to carry out a measure without moving that jack. And in some scenarios, in some situations where you've got perhaps a less experienced official, maybe it's a good option to wedge a jack. But please bear in mind that you're more likely to move it. It kind of follows on to a question I received this morning, actually. Thank you for keeping the questions coming in. From Steve Whiting. talking about markers, and excuse me for looking up, I'm reading the question. In the world of club markers, you'll quite often have a marker who accidentally moves the jack. This can sometimes make the difference between winning or losing that measure. Absolutely. And what should happen in those circumstances? Firstly, if all agree, and secondly, if the players don't agree. And it's an interesting one. The jacks being displaced or balls being displaced by officials, hopefully is rare, but it does happen. We're only human. But there are a couple of scenarios there, as you've explained, Steve. And firstly, with markers, if they move the jack with the equipment they're using, such as a pair of calipers, then the players and the opponents should agree on that replacement of that jack. If they can't agree, then the marker replaces it. Sometimes some of these get a bit complicated, these displacement questions, so I'm just going to see if I can find the right chart for you. Here we go. So jack displacement during measuring here, and we're looking at I think I showed these last time, these displacement charts, and they're quite handy for explaining displacement questions. And these, you'll see this one is relating to jack displacement during measuring. And you'll see the middle column there, it asks the question, was the jack displaced by the marker's equipment? And that's exactly the scenario that we're talking about. The marker must put the jack back to the position agreed by the opponents. If the opponents can't agree, the marker must put the jack back to its former position. Okay, so that's how that scenario is dealt with. Hopefully the marker will learn from that and not do that any further. Okay, thank you for that. How's things going on? Okay, thank you everybody for joining. I hope the video sorting itself out now. I can see it's speeded up a little bit. It was a bit jerky earlier, so I hope it's picked up a little bit now. And again, thank you for joining. Apologies for the few technical glitches this morning. Okay, let's talk about laser measures. Interesting one. I'm glad that some of my friends and colleagues from Australia and New Zealand are online at the moment, because there is a huge difference between the use of laser measures and the adoption of laser measures between UK countries and Australia and New Zealand. And it's been interesting in the last couple of weeks seeing some of the products online that have been approved by countries like Bowls Australia for use in their competitions. Now I'm going to give my personal view here, and people won't agree with this, but that's entirely your right. But my view with laser measures, with the ones that we currently have out on the marketplace at the moment, is I do not believe they're quick enough to be used against a normal string measure. And I know that sounds a bit old-fashioned and I'm an old fogey, but to be honest, I would find a string measure a lot quicker to use than a laser measure. It's not saying I'm ruling them out completely, and I perhaps would use them in the future, but at the moment I just don't have the trust in that technology and the setup and the speed of use that would convince me to choose that versus a box measure, okay, or a caliper if you can get a laser in a caliper gap. So that's my view at the moment, but having said that, there are a lot of laser measures out there. The one that's on the screen at the moment is the Crackerjack laser measure, which has gained some popularity in Australia over the last few weeks. And it's small, compact, price, and I'm sure John's on here. I'm sure he'll correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was around about $100, $110, which is what, 50, 60 pound, something like that, UK pound. So not a cheap piece of kit, but you know, not unachievable. But you know, in the right hands, I'm sure these work, and I've seen some of my Australian colleagues use these laser measures extremely efficiently, and you know, they can make them work absolutely perfectly. So, you know, whilst my opinion is I'm not ready yet to move into the 21st century, others are, and that's great to see. Other examples, we've got the impulse measure, which I think is available in the UK as well, and there's others. There's the Bowles line measure, which is a little bit more expensive. It's a bit more of a complicated setup, but is accurate. So they're available. In terms of the World Bowls stance, and I did say right at the beginning of the stream that I wasn't here to give World Bowls opinions. I'm not representing World Bowls. But in terms of approval, World Bowls don't actually approve any particular measure or particular device. There are loads of things out on the market for bowls, and if every one of them was to be approved by the World Governing Body, then Laws Committee would be doing nothing but approving things. It really lies with the national governing bodies to approve their use for their local setup, and there are pieces of equipment around the world that differ from UK. There's UK equipment that differs from Australia equipment. There's American equipment that differs from Canadian equipment. So every umpire's got their own box of tricks, and there's equipment that's used in various scenarios. Not all of them will be approved by any governing body or by any world body. So it's really down to the local setup to allow their approval or use or not. So I hope that helps in terms of clarifying certainly where World Bowls stand on approval of such equipment. But you know, laser measures are there. If you can afford them and you want to use them, then obviously please do. Sue Way, hi Sue, joining from New Zealand. Agree with the speed and the laser measures. Some we tried in New Zealand didn't work in bright sun. Yeah, that's one of the challenges. I think some of them also, there's a finite distance they work over before you see them. Don't get me wrong, I think they've got a place, but it's challenging sometimes with some new equipment. It just needs proving, that's all. Charlotte, thank you. Yes, I know I'm getting on a bit. We've got some discussion about trousers and shorts. Yeah, this is where we need to relax the game a little bit, I think, to encourage new people to start. Okay, John McKenzie, yeah, agree. Any new measuring technology has to be fast or quicker than a box measure and must be more accurate. Yeah, okay, agree. I mean, I think there were measures used way back in the mid-80s at things like World Championships. I believe they were sonic measures rather than lasers at that point, and they failed miserably. But I don't think at the moment we're in a position to be seeing something like a laser measure at world level, World Championships or Commonwealth Games level just yet. I think there's a little bit more proving to do before we get to that point. Okay, any more? Keep the questions coming. If there's anything specific you want to understand and hopefully I can answer, then please do. I want to just cover a little bit in the last few 15 minutes or so, cover a little bit about proactive umpiring. It's a bit of a weird phrase, I guess, for some people, but proactive umpiring. Our view as umpire trainers or in people working at all sorts of different levels is that an official should be active, should be part of the game, should be proactive, and keeping alert and keeping active around the rinks. And it's proactivity, in my view, that reduces the incidences of law breaches. And let me give you an example of this, and I know there's people watching here that won't agree with this view, and it's quite an interesting, I've had a number of debates about this, certainly in the last couple of weeks as well, and they won't agree with my view on this, but let me give you a couple of scenarios that are game changers, and I've seen it happen at a high level, and it does cause a lot of problem. And I think if umpires are a little bit more proactive, then we perhaps would have avoided the situation. Let me give you a scenario. A jack gets taken into the ditch, or jack gets moved, and the bowl that moved it goes into the ditch. It's a live bowl. In terms of the game happening there and then, that bowl moved the jack somewhere and it went in the ditch. Now, for whatever reason, the team of that bowl didn't mark it, didn't indicate it on the bank, didn't say anything. Perhaps they were up the rink celebrating, hugging and kissing and high-fiving. Clearly not in the current situation with social distancing, but perhaps they were, and they didn't get round to marking that toucher. In terms of the laws of the sport, that bowl ceases to be a toucher when the next bowl comes to rest. So technically speaking, that bowl in the ditch is sitting there as a dead bowl. If at the end of an umpire is called on to carry out a measure, there is no evidence there that that bowl is live or dead, so therefore it's taken out of the ditch. What happens if the team protest and say, well, that's a toucher, it clearly moved the jack, it might have taken the jack in the ditch, it might have been the last bowl of an end that took the jack in the ditch. There's a big protest and all of a sudden you've taken a dead bowl out of the ditch. Was the umpire right to just step on and take that bowl out without asking any questions? In my view, I would say no. And this is where the proactivity comes into it. If an umpire is alert and walking around the rinks, there is often no reason why they wouldn't perhaps notice a jack being hit, a bowl going in the ditch. Yeah, okay, they might be measuring on another rink, but when you get off the rink, you're scanning, looking what's happening down the ditches, looking at what's happening at the other end, working with your colleagues, and there's no real reason why you wouldn't sort of look down the ditch and think, oh, it's a bowl in the ditch there, let me go and investigate and have a little look, see what's going on. You're not interfering, you're not getting in the way, you're just having a look. There's no indicator on the bank. Is it a dead bowl, is it a live bowl? One of the duties of an umpire is to uphold the laws of the sport. And one of the laws of the sport that has actually been breached in this situation before we even get to a measure is the fact that that bowl wasn't nominated or marked as a toucher. So, rhetorical question, should the umpire proactively ask the players what that bowl's doing in the ditch? In my view, probably yes. And this is where the comments go mad from some of my colleagues who don't agree with that viewpoint. What I'm doing as an umpire, being proactive, is I'm upholding that law. Is this bowl a toucher? Is it a dead bowl? If it's a dead bowl and it isn't a toucher, then get rid of it. Don't just leave it there. Move it out the ditch. That's another law. So in my view, I'm being proactive and actually looking at the situations that are going on. What that does is avoid the scenario at the end of the end where I walk on, look at the bowl, pick it up, it's not a toucher, call it a dead bowl, but everybody knows it's live. Just because they didn't have chalk or just because they didn't bother to indicate it anyway. So the problem with all of this is it causes a lot of grief amongst the players, it causes a lot of grief between the officials and the players, and actually, in my view, if you're just being a little bit more proactive and dealing with the situation early, then you would avoid all this aggro and discord. So that's my view, and I can I can see some of you wouldn't agree with that scenario, but that's my guidance in terms of being proactive. You have to ask the questions, you have to determine the facts of what's on the green before you go down and measure. Ask the questions: is this bowl a toucher? What am I measuring? Take out everything you don't want me to look at. What's left in the ditch? Are they touches? And get some agreement. Now there will be people out there that will, let's call them cheats, and there will be people out there that will like to take advantage and perhaps will disagree with the opponents. And in those scenarios you will need to deal with that. The default position of course is that if you haven't seen that bowl go in the ditch and you haven't seen it touch the jack, the default position clearly has got to be a dead bowl, because there is no evidence to suggest otherwise if there's a disagreement. But hopefully, with good sportsmanship, we'll all agree that bowl, yeah, it's a toucher, sorry we didn't mark it, my bad, umpire, if you've got any chalk please, because I need some. So those are usually the situation. So I hope that's helped in terms of a bit of proactivity. Okay, that would hurt. Okay, so I've missed something here then, if something's going to hurt. Charlotte, can you or would you remind players to mark touches? Yes. Just ask the question, is that bowl a toucher or not? Okay, we talk about line bowls as well. Okay. Yeah, if you're not familiar, and again this comes when we're talking about live bowls and what's live and what's dead and who's making the decisions. That actually answers my argument in terms of determining whether a bowl is live or dead. If a bowl is right on the boundary line of the rink, and nobody's actually really noticed, but there's a few more bowls been played, that bowl is still sitting there, the players need to make a decision whether that bowl is live or dead as soon as their attention is drawn to it. And it's certainly not unacceptable for an official to stand on the bank and ask the players to go and check that bowl. Is it live or dead? You're upholding another law of sport, determining whether bowls are live or dead. So there's nothing wrong with asking the question. And if they go and have a look and they say, well, no, I have no idea, can you have a check for us? Then you're getting involved and you're getting the string or the scope to have a look down the line to see if that bowl is live or dead. So. Okay. Yes, Roger Black from World Bowls. He was the one I've had the discussion about the proactivity. And what about Law 15.3? Just remind me, Roger, I can't remember numbers. What do you like? 15.3, let me just remind myself what that is about. Yes, I did discuss that, Roger, about marking the toucher before the succeeding bowl comes to rest, and also at the end of the end, if a toucher ceases to be a toucher if after 30 seconds of the last bowl coming to rest. So those are the two scenarios. Okay, Alex, welcome Alex. You managed to get out of bed early enough to join us at 11 o'clock this morning. Thanks, Alex. Toucher in the ditch not marked with chalk, but a marker has been placed on the bank. Has the bowl been nominated? You know what? In my view, yes, I would say it has. But I think that this is where you need to have that, be proactive and ask the questions. Okay, that's been indicated on the bank. Have you not got any chalk in your pocket? So a physical acknowledgement that live bowl has gone in the ditch and marking it on the bank should be sufficient really to determine it. And yeah, okay, the law says it should be nominated. What does that mean verbally? Does that mean physically? Does that mean visually? How does that work? But in my view, the way I would interpret that is that a marker on the bank would indicate that that bowl is a toucher. So thanks for that. And again, I don't expect everybody to agree with what I'm saying. I'm just sharing my views of the way I would approach these situations. So, any other questions coming through? Anything on jack wedging? Okay. Anything else you want to cover? Please jump in. We've got a couple of minutes left. I mean, it's just gone 12 now. We'll close up in a couple of minutes. We started a little bit late, and apologies for that again. I mean, I hope this morning has been useful. Apologies for the glitches with the technology. I was trying something a little bit new. I hope the benefit of the graphics and the explanations has sort of outweighed the few little streaming issues that we had this morning. And yeah, Facebook decided to have a bit of a wobbly fit with me at 11 o'clock, so apologies for that. But again, I hope this has been useful. I hope it's been a little bit of an insight into what officials do, and some of the discussions that we have behind the scenes when we're not out on the rinks, and give you an insight in how we think in terms of our officiating. So I hope that's been useful. And what I'll do is I'll put a poll on under the stream recording, and if you want me to do this again, then please just fill in the poll, and I'm more than happy to do that. Ron Eden, welcome Ron. Quick question there, scorecards updated off the green. Interesting, that's a very good question actually, Ron. Technically speaking, no. Scorecards should be maintained by the relevant players or the marker. They shouldn't really be done off the green. Having said that, I think we have to accept a little bit of common sense, and one of the examples I would give of that common sense is when I was fortunate enough to mark the gold medal singles match in Manchester 2002 Commonwealth Games. In Manchester, the rain was incessant on that day, on that final day, and there was no way I was going to keep that scorecard in any shape or form that resembled a scorecard at the end of the match. It would have turned to papier mâché, and the most logical thing to do would be, for me, was to hand it to my scoreboard turner, who was sitting under an umbrella. He was doing the scoreboard anyway, and it was easier for him to actually mark that card and keep it nice and dry for me, but acknowledging that I had to keep on top of that score and make sure that it was absolutely 100% right every single end. So generally speaking, for run-of-the-mill games, it shouldn't be scorecards shouldn't be left on the bank and updated off the rink. I've seen so many games with disputed scorecards that it's just not worth doing, and that's in both singles and team games as well. John, what do I do when scorecards are not the same and both players cannot agree on the area? How do you resolve? Great question that, and that's again, after 30 odd years of officiating, that has actually happened as well. Unfortunately, within the county of Surrey, here where I am, we had a singles competition where the marker wasn't particularly up to scratch. I was officiating, and there were some problems throughout the game with scoreboards, with scorecards not working, and the players getting a little bit niggly with it all. When I received the scorecard at the end of the match to sign it off, both players had signed it, clearly hadn't checked it, and the scores were so tight, the game was so tight, but in actual fact, when I added the scores up, the player that lost should have won 2 ends previous. There was a mistake around about the end. When we're getting to sort of 18, 19 shots, there was a mistake on the card. Unfortunately, in that scenario, we only really noted, we started having discussion, and the both players, and neither would relent, neither would give up. The winner wasn't going to give up the game, and the other guy wanted to replay it and wasn't happy. And we never did resolve it that night, but what we did do was replay that match. That was replayed about two nights later, and the right person won. So yeah, it's a difficult situation. It's not easy to resolve, and clearly in a tournament of games, you're not going to get a chance to replay things. But in that scenario, we were able to. But it was a very, very difficult situation, John. Thank you for that question. What about if bowls are delivered? Okay, Darren Stanford, thank you for your question. What about if bowls were delivered with chalk mark from a previous end and then goes in the ditch when the jackal bowl is already in the ditch? Okay, so if a chalk mark is left on a bowl, similar to marking a toucher, you do it the other way around. So a bowl either needs to be nominated as a non-toucher, or the chalk mark needs to be removed when it's safe to do so. And again, in my view, proactive umpiring, I'd be looking for those sort of scenarios. Difficult to spot those ones, but certainly looking for those sort of scenarios, and making sure players are aware of what's a toucher, what's not a toucher. So yeah, remove the chalk mark as best you can. Okay, so we're about an hour in. I'm running dry, so thank you for joining us again. I really hope that was useful, interesting. Again, apologies for the stream at the start. If you've got any questions after this stream, when you're watching it back, or you've missed something, or I've missed something, then please do comment on the Facebook comments below, and I'll be more than happy to answer those as we go through. So thank you all this morning for joining. It's been a pleasure having you watch, and hope somebody's learnt something from this. And I look forward to seeing you again all soon, and hopefully we'll all be out on the rinks fairly soon as well, but obviously keeping safe. So from me this morning, thank you, keep safe, keep well, and hopefully I'll catch you all again soon.